Yo, what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for clicking on this video. The NFL draft just happened last week. Today I'm going to be going over my rookie losers for fantasy football. I just released my winners video, so if you haven't seen that yet, make sure to go check it out. But like I said, just didn't do the rookies today, not doing the actual vets. Going to be going over the losers of where their pre-draft fantasy value was and where it is now. Some of them are a lot more minor than others, and I will be getting to the actual vets later. So make sure you subscribe and stay around for that. Also, drop a like on this video if you like this content. It really helps me out a ton. And also, please make sure to drop a comment if there's anyone that I left off this list that you think, or if any of these guys you think aren't losers. I'm also going to be going in order of running back, wide receiver, quarterbacks, and tight end. All right, but with that out of the way, let's actually get into these guys. All right, first up, starting with the running backs, like I said, one of the biggest losers of this entire NFL draft is going to be Zach Charbonnet. Now, we did get that second round draft capital, which is awesome to see, but he got drafted to the Seattle Seahawks, who have one of the worst situations that he could have gone to. They have a very young elite running back in Kenneth Walker, who they drafted last year and was unbelievable this year. So it's nice that Zach Charbonnet was running back 3 off the board, but the fact that he got drafted to the Seattle Seahawks just makes him an absolute loser. It's going to hurt his value a ton, and it's going to hurt Kenneth Walker's value a ton. I still think that they can both be good for fantasy. Zach Charbonnet is a lot better pass catcher, so I think that he'll be used in that role mostly, while also being able to spell Kenneth Walker when he needs it. And I still think Kenneth Walker can be like a top 10 running back, but I think that like top 5, top 3 possibility is kind of gone. I think a good way to think about this is kind of Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, how it was a couple years ago in Cleveland. I think that's a good comparison to what this could be like, where I think Nick Chubb was kind of a back end running back 1, and then Kareem Hunt was kind of a back end running back 2, where if one of them got hurt, they would be unbelievably elite, but it definitely kills both of their upsides. So overall, Zach Charbonnet, one of the biggest losers from this draft. Another guy who was a much smaller loser, but still was, and probably just because I was so high on him, but it's going to be Israel Anaconda. He got drafted in the 5th round, so that's pretty bad draft capital, no real commitment from the team for him. And then he also got drafted to the New York Jets, so he's going to be behind Breece Hall. I think this really just makes Anaconda a really good backup, and maybe a little bit that Breece Hall isn't quite as healthy as some of us hoped he would be. But regardless, I think that the hope that Anaconda would be able to get a lot of work and actually be fantasy relevant besides just being a backup, that's pretty much going to be gone now. Another running back loser that I'm going to have here is going to be Dwayne McBride. He got drafted in the 7th round by the Minnesota Vikings. So again, pretty bad draft capital here. A lot of people liked him. I wasn't the biggest fan of him, but a lot of people did like him going into the draft. And if he got good draft capital, then I would have to respect it. But literally got picked in the last round, and he's on the Minnesota Vikings, so he's going to be behind Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison. So this just pretty much kills any value of him. And the last running back I want to talk about, that's going to be Sean Tucker. He ended up going completely undrafted. I was a big fan of his tape watching it, but he went completely undrafted. I guess he had some issue with his heart, and that's why he went undrafted, which, you know, definitely makes sense if that's the case. We just didn't know about that going into the draft. Although he has signed with Tampa Bay, and if he makes a team, then that's actually a decent landing spot. The only other real person there is Rachaad White, so I think he could have some opportunity to get on the field. So I think it's actually a decent landing spot, but the fact that he was undrafted was, you know, that's not ideal. But I have heard a lot of times that if you're going to go in the 7th round, a lot of people would rather go undrafted. So there could be some upside there. Definitely want to keep an eye on him, but overall got to be a loser since he went undrafted. Now moving on to the wide receivers, I think this one could be a bit controversial. Very small loser, very, very small. But I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba is a slight loser in this draft. I think that his upside is going to be a little bit capped. The fact that he got drafted by Seattle, he has DK Metcalf who's going to be ahead of him, and they just paid. And they also have Tyler Lockett ahead of him, who this probably does make Tyler Lockett somewhat dispensable. Although Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith-Njigba do play quite different roles in the offense, but it definitely is kind of the sign of Tyler Lockett going to be aging out soon. He's going to be 31 years old this season, and this definitely is going to take away from Tyler Lockett, but at the same time, there's a lot of competition for Jackson Smith-Njigba. I don't think he can become that clear wide receiver 1 there. He also didn't get picked until the 20th pick, and there's a lot of rumors of him going a lot higher, and if he did go higher, it definitely would have helped his draft capital. I still think he's a wide receiver 1 in this class, do not get me wrong, but he definitely had the opportunity to solidify himself as the second skill position to go off in this draft, and I don't think that's the case now. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the clear number 2 in this draft, and I've definitely seen people who have QJ ahead of JSN, but I still think Jackson Smith-Njigba is the number 1 receiver, but I do think that this ever so slightly hurt his value. Now the next wide receiver I want to talk about is Zay Flowers, who got picked the 22nd pick in the 1st round, so he did get really good draft capital. There were some rumors of him going higher, but I never really believed that. I think that the real issue with him is that he got drafted to Baltimore, and there's a bunch of competition there now. You got Mark Andrews, Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, also Lamar Jackson. As good as he is, he's not a high volume thrower. So I think this is a great NFL move, and I totally get it from the team perspective. But for what could have happened with Zay Flowers and where he could have landed, I think that this is a slight tick down for him. I think that he's still going to be the wide receiver 4 in this class, but I just do think that this slightly hurt his upside. The next wide receiver I'm going to talk about is going to be Jalen Hyatt. He fell all the way to the 3rd round, which was definitely a fall from where most people thought he could have gone. I heard some people say kind of the back end of the 1st round, if not definitely the 2nd round. He did fall all the way to the 3rd round, which is kind of unfortunate for him. I actually do like the landing spot kind of though for the New York Giants. I think he's exactly the wide receiver that they need. And while there is a decent amount of competition there, none of them are really elite. And besides Darren Waller, I think that he could kind of beat out everybody there. So overall, I do think that it is a good landing spot, but I do got to move him down somewhat in my rankings just because there were receivers that I did not think would go ahead of him that did, like Jaden Reed and Rashee Rice. So slight take down for him. Kind of similar to this next guy is going to be Josh Downs, who fell to the 16th pick of the 3rd round. I think this just means that NFL teams just didn't value him the same way a lot of fantasy people did. I was never the biggest fan of him, mostly because of his size. I really like his tape, but I just don't think his size can translate really, really well to the NFL. And now they have Anthony Richardson there, who is not going to be a high volume passer, kind of like Lamar Jackson. So I don't think it's the worst landing spot, but definitely not the best and not with high draft capital. And when somebody like Anthony Richardson is starting to develop, they're going to be throwing to their big body wide receivers because they know that's safe. And they have Michael Pittman there, who is huge compared to Josh Downs. So I feel like this is definitely another tick down for Josh Downs in comparison to where he was going before drafts. And moving on to the quarterback, only going to talk about one here. I think it's pretty obvious for everyone. Will Levis, massive loser in this draft, fell out of the top 5 all the way out of the 1st round and into the 2nd round, which definitely unfortunate for him. I do, however, think that his landing spot is decent. He's going to be behind Ryan Tannehill to start, and I imagine that he'll get some run this year, so they'll get to see if he has the ability to be a really good starting quarterback in this league. I really don't know at this point. I think where he got drafted was probably a little bit more reasonable for what his skill was in comparison to where people were projecting him to go. But given the fact that he was rumored to go at the number 2 pick or the number 4 pick, this is definitely a huge value drop for Will Levis overall. And the last guy to talk about is going to be Darnell Washington. Most people had him as a tight end 3 in this class going into the draft, and the fact that he fell all the way to the end of the 3rd round is going to be a huge hit for him. He's also fell to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have Pat Freiermuth ahead of him, and Pat Freiermuth is much more of a receiving tight end. So I think that Darnell Washington is going to be much more of a kind of road grading tight end, and he'll get some screen passes here or there. I just don't know how effective he'll really be in the fantasy context going forward. The fact that he fell all the way here, there are definitely concerns about his knees, and he has a better receiving tight end in front of him. So one of the biggest losers from this draft definitely going to be Darnell Washington. They're my top 10 losers overall for the rookie class. Let me know what you guys think about them. Going to be moving on to the veterans now, so stay tuned for those. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see y'all there. Later.